Let me do it again. Well, hello, welcome to another episode of Salty Sundays. We're here with a very special guest. We're in the KFUG studio with Paul Critz. How's it going?
Going very well. Nice to meet you, man. Nice to
Yeah,
be here.
nice to meet you too. How's your morning going?
It's not bad because I didn't have to get up and go over to Porta Pints or anything and just come over across the driveway to here. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no,
It's
we're
convenient.
happy about that too. It's cool to be here and kind of changing up the location a little bit.
Right.
So you are the owner operator.
Well, we are a nonprofit corporation,
Nonprofit,
so
okay.
nobody's an owner.
Okay.
But yeah, the closest thing in the corporate world would be I would be the CEO, and in the radio world, station manager.
Awesome. How long have you guys been operating KFUG?
What is it? It's 12 years?
12 years?
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
And did you kind of get things going with KFUG, or was that?
Nope. I don't know if you can show it, but this guy up here did right there in
This
that
guy.
poster.
Okay. I'm going to snap a picture of him before we go.
yeah. Get that because it's he's the guy who created all this, Jim Wayman. And,
Jim Wayman.
Jim Weird Wayman. He was on the radio on KPOD all the way back into all the way back in the '60s, and then traveled around and did radio around the country, and came back here in the '80s, and was just kind of this free floating hippie DJ guy.
I love that.
And he got the idea he wanted to do, and he was homeless for a lot of the time I've known him. He got in a house over in the Birch Tract and started on this online radio called it was KFUG. He came up with the call sign KFUG,
Yeah.
and got a website and went on the internet, just streaming, not broadcasting. And I knew him. We were friends, and I'd done radio since high school is when I got my first radio job.
Okay.
And it had been a while since I'd done anything like that, so I started making a show together called Night Soil, and he was
Night
streaming it.
Soil.
And then we started thinking about, sitting around and thinking about how we could make it an actual radio station and not just a streaming radio station. And that's where it was born.
Dude, that's absolutely brilliant. So it started with kind of just like an internet streaming thing, and then, you guys kind of started operating it together, and were able to eventually get this whole thing going here.
Yeah.
That's pretty freaking awesome, man.
We started out doing what was called Part 15 compliant, which is an AM broadcast, and the transmitters were so low power that you don't even need like a license. You can be unlicensed. It's basically you have the same broadcasting power as like a toaster, right? and
How far of a radius is that?
if you do it right, if you install them right and set it up, you can get out a mile or so.
A mile,
just with
okay.
a low power. And we bought 3 of these things and put them up around Crescent City, and 2 of them are still out there.
Wow.
We got one on the office in the harbor. And I go down every morning, and my wife and I go for a walk around the harbor and walk into town and stuff,
Yeah.
and walk through. And I always look when we're leaving. Yeah, it's still up there on the pole. It's just
Wow.
like a lunchbox size thing with this 8-foot antenna coming out of it. Just,
That's amazing.
yeah.
So you guys were kind of like pirate radio at first, just like
Sort
this
of,
small
yeah.
little thing going on.
Unlicensed. But I knew it was okay because I'm sitting, like the whole time I've done radio, I've seen an FCC agent twice in my life. And once was back in the 80s. I'm in high school, and I'm doing a weekend show at an AM station down in Tulare, California, and this guy in this blue blazer comes like barreling through the door.
G-Man.
Exactly, FCC man. And that's what they wore, these powder blue blazers from like the 70s and stuff. It was really weird. And
IBM's.
he came in and like ripped me a new one because the light was out on our transmitter antenna, which is out by Highway 99. I had no idea, so he went and he like, how do you deal with that? And I showed him what I knew, and then he was a real dick, and then left. And then the second one I saw was KFUG. We were the AM, the Part 15, the 3 transmitters around town that we connected using phone lines. I'm sitting at the desk one day, and this black SUV is cruising around like up and down I Street. I'm going, what the heck? I mean, noticeably like a weird sort of vehicle.
Yeah.
And they park, and this woman comes in, and she hands me her card. She's an FCC agent. She asked to see the logs and something else, and I'm like, we don't have any of that.
The logs.
The logs. You have to keep if you're a broadcast station, you have to keep logs of like when you're on the air, when your transmitter goes down.
Oh, okay.
If you do political advertising, you have to keep political logs of all of this stuff. But and I explained, hey, we're just Part 15. And she asked, what? And I told her the transmitters, the range masters. And she asked, how far does your signal go? I said, about a mile. And she said, yeah, okay.
Okay. So,
and like laughed. Yeah, like, okay, we don't have to mess with you.
So since then, I'm assuming you guys have up the equipment and stuff. Yeah. So how far is your range currently?
Well, in 2017, 15, oh god, I forget the exact year, we got our LPFM, which is first time in 13 years the FCC started taking applications for low power community radio stations, which gives you 100 watts. And that's all you get, because they don't want you competing with the people who make money.
Oh, so gotcha.
Anyway, the
lovely.
So we got that license. It was pretty easy to get, and then it was the first transmitter we had. We had it in the Elks building downtown, and the antenna on the roof. And we get out, it kind of depends on atmospheric conditions and stuff. But if you can get maybe 5 miles out, that's pretty good.
5 miles? That's pretty good. Yeah. If you think about that as like how much space that actually is,
Well, then you think about how stupid it is to put it downtown Crescent City, where half of that listening radius is out to sea, where nobody's going to see it. So
that's so true.
But yeah, no, and then that's all dependent too on a lot of like how high the antenna is. And
so atmospheric conditions, that can kind of affect like where this signal, how well the signal is received.
Water gets in the way of FM a whole bunch, and there's a lot of water, and trees especially. That's why it's important. Like, we're only about 30 feet up here now where we are, but we've got we had the Dr. Caldwell's family gave us $25,000, the Caldwell clan, to
shout out to them.
Yeah, and it's the second time they've done it, actually.
Wow.
They did it initially when we moved in. That's here,
amazing.
And all the equipment over there on the broadcast board, this heat pump on the wall, all of that, they paid for that.
Dude,
and
that's awesome.
They've given us another round of funding to this spring erect a tower that'll double the height of the antenna and get us out even farther.
Heck yeah! Mm-hmm. So things are kind of moving. There's actually a pretty good trajectory with all of it.
Yeah,
and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Because I noticed I listen to KFUG out of Eureka sometimes. And sometimes I'll notice I can't get the signal at all, and sometimes I can. I wonder if that has something to do with what you were saying, atmospheric conditions. So, man, that's awesome. So you guys are kind of moving in that direction, and you've been operating this for a little while now. But where are you from originally?
Fresno. I was born in Fresno, grew up in the San Joaquin Valley, grew up in a little town south of there, Tulare is where I grew up.
Tulare.
Most of the time, yeah.
Nice, and that's kind of just like a valley, sort of California Valley, typical.
Boring ass farm town. Yeah.
Farm town, okay, yeah.
It's with that big lake that came up in the San Joaquin Valley with all the rains last year. It's Tulare Lake.
Oh, dang, really?
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah,
there was a lot of video of that.
Yeah.
And then did you? I guess. What was your first radio experience like? Where did you get onto? Like, were you always into radio, or how did that kind of come about?
It's weird. It's yes and no. My dad did media back in the '60s when he was in the Navy. He did He did a radio show.
He did a radio show for the Navy.
In the Navy, yeah, for the Armed Forces
That's
Network.
Pretty cool.
He was in. We were stationed. I was a kid. I was like 3.
Yeah.
And we lived in Japan, and he was at Yokosuka, and he had it was great. It's just a dream gig. He said. It was a 10-minute radio show, and he had all week to produce it, and that's all he did. That's how he contributed. That's how he contributed to the Vietnam War.
That sounds like the best job just about ever, and you get to live in Japan.
Exactly. Exactly. He taught himself like photography. He took pictures there, and came back and became a photographer after the Navy. But he learned all of that there, and I don't know if that was part of it or if it's genetic or what. But driving
rubbed off maybe.
Huh?
Subconsciously rubbed off on
yeah. But driving, I was up here visiting, and driving. We were out on 101 out in Smith River, and I just went, I think I'd like to maybe get into radio.
Okay.
And when I went back home to Tulare, where I was living at the time in high school, I just started looking around. I figured I'd find some place I could get a job sweeping up or doing something like that.
Yeah.
And I walked into an AM station. I can't remember the frequency, 13 something, and they played what was called the music of your life. And it was just big band, like crooner stuff from like the 30s, 40s, and early 50s, right up to rock and roll, but not crossing the threshold.
You would kind of get there. It's like, oh, these jazz musicians are getting kind of crazy.
They're almost kind of leaning into it, but
it's crazy pot smoking jazz musicians.
No, it wasn't that good. You didn't get any like jump stuff. You didn't get any rhythm and blues, anything like that. It was very white, very straight. And
you're like, well, that was a wild. It's like a very modern, conservative tune. It's like that was very wild, wasn't it?
I got a story about that. Well, I'll get to that story. But I walk in, and this guy, Carl Soros was his name, and he was under the desk. His head popped up because he was working on something like wiring or something.
Perfect. That's exactly how.
And I walked in. He goes, "Are you here for the announcer's job?" And I went, Yes.
Oh, what?
And he told me to go home and read a couple of articles from the newspaper on a cassette tape. He asked, "Do you have a cassette recorder?" Yeah. And just get my voice on a cassette tape and bring it in, and I did that, and I got the gig, and it was just like part-time, like two weekend shifts.
Wow.
And one day, and it was a daylight station, so we go off the air at sunset. And one day it was like half an hour till we were going off the air, and I was the guy who'd sign us off. It was like a Saturday or Sunday. And I'd been playing. I was a musician too, so I played bass in jazz band in high school.
Okay.
And they had a very strict format at this Music of Your Life thing where you'd rotate through these different eras and categories of music. And so I went, okay, screw that. It's a half hour. We're going to be off the air. So I just went and picked out like the coolest jazz stuff I could find, like big
Miles
band jazz.
Davis? Oh, okay.
No, nothing as cool as Miles
You
Davis.
like Bitches
but like
Brew? Throw it on.
yeah, for the last half hour.
Here's something different.
Here's one song from Bitches Brew. Yeah. No, it was but like sing like Benny Goodman stuff like
Okay.
that. And I loaded up the hour, and when we went off the air after I did this special like hour, I got a call from the program director. Told me if I ever broke format like that again, I'd be out on my ass.
Damn.
Whoa, sorry. All right.
Yeah.
That was my first experience with the program director. Yeah.
So that's so interesting. So it's like your voice kind of, when you went home and you recorded those tapes, did you like try to affect like a radio voice?
Not at first. That kind of happened over time, and at the second station I worked at later, and I'm in college at this point, and my friends would call me on the studio line and ask me to say things to them in my radio voice.
Oh yeah, like I can't even do a radio voice. I don't have anywhere near that.
I can do a really disgusting radio voice, and I'm kind of ashamed by it.
Are you gonna show us? Are you gonna show us?
Oh man, let's see. All right, what was the call sign we did back? It was 92.9. So 92.9 KFSO.
Yes.
All oldies, all the time.
That's so perfect.
And then one day I had one night, and when I worked there, I had an overnight gig. I finally got my first full-time job, and it was like midnight to 6. And I had laryngitis one night, so I just did the whole show as Henry Kissinger.
Okay.
You're listening to 92.9 KFSO. Yeah, that's the way I amuse myself. Nobody complained about that. I didn't get a phone call about that. But yeah, the radio voice.
They're like, more of that. They're like, please, more of that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, to the radio. And so that was your first gig, and it kind of got your door in there. That was like AM radio and kind of getting used to like the technology, I guess, and maybe like the flow. Did you go from there directly to another radio job? Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Got an offer for I don't remember how I applied for that or what. I don't remember how I got that second job, but it was a full-time. Was it full-time? No, it wasn't full-time to begin with. It was a part-time gig, still weekends. That's what the commercial radio was. Like during the week was the full-time stuff, and then the weekends you'd get stuff.
Okay.
The part-timers would be on the weekends. But it was another oldies station, but it wasn't as oldies. It was this time. It was like 60s, 70s, 50s,
nice.
60s, 70s. So I got to play some rock and roll.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason I took that one. The program director who called me out and bitched me out that first time, he was trying to talk me out of it. There's lots more opportunity. And to me, it just boiled down. I just sick of this music, man. I want to hear some rock and roll. I want to play Chuck Berry on the radio instead of Kay Kaiser.
Yeah, you're like it's trying to move a little bit, The people that liked that music are mostly dead now.
Yeah, that's
that's kind of the sad part about that. Yeah. Is like that generation is kind of gone.
I got a lot of musical knowledge out of that, though. I mean, in the references, people talk about the Ink Spots, and I know exactly what they sounded like. Things like the Mills Brothers. I know that stuff.
That's like real like early recordings. Kind of getting into like the beginning of kind of when they were starting to record music in America, right?
The Ink Spots are like 40s.
Oh, okay.
So that's like second generation.
Gotcha.
But like we've got 78s here that were recorded in the teens.
Damn.
Yeah.
I heard a recording from it's an old country song like Appalachian stuff, and it was it's like Can the Circle Be Unbroken? And it was recorded.
It's all like scratchy and stuff.
It's so scratchy, but it's like there's something kind of like surreal about it when you listen to it, just like especially like I don't know if you've heard that song or not, but they're talking about like the Can the Circle Be Unbroken? Like if the mom of the family died,
yeah, it's the Carter family.
The Carter family. That's what it was. Yeah, and it was like it's like talking about like okay, mom's dead, like she's being taken away, by the Undertaker. Like are we gonna be able to keep anyway? So there's something kind of like really, kind of like almost like haunted about the song, because you're like, well, this is a totally different time, you know.
Exactly. So they're singing
issues.
about time, and they're singing about the circle, and then you're experiencing it in the music too, because you're listening almost 100 years later.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's still somehow, you know, relevant or whatever. You know, I guess that's how music is. So you kind of grew up playing music then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what was kind of your favorite kind of music and stuff? What was your influences?
Big thing. Okay, biggest the sort of foundational musical experience for me. I was what would I have been 13. John Lennon was killed, and there was Beatles music everywhere, and I felt bad because John Lennon was and it's also like I also wrote a poem about John Lennon being killed in a short fiction class I had when they did things like short fiction classes in middle school, and so it was kind of the birth.
Don't do that anymore.
No, there was kind of the birth of my musical sensibilities and also writing, which is another thing I do. So it was like a Tuesday or Thursday, I forget when it was, at night, and one of the first things I thought was, oh wow, all over the radio this weekend it's going to be Beatles music. I got to record it, because back then you couldn't just go get it.
Right.
You know, you had to go buy the records or listen to the radio, and I was like one of those guys with the cassette, you know, and you're waiting for songs to come on the radio, and then you catch them.
Heck yeah, you can record that.
Yeah, and so that's what I got into. So the first big like musical thing, and when I uncle let me borrow an electric guitar and a little plastic combo practice amp, and just playing Beatles music.
Nice. No, that's awesome, man. I actually really do love the Beatles. Roy and I were just talking about that because there was like a bunch of Beatles songs coming up, and I was like,
well, no, you came in during our Beatles show. Yeah. That's what's yeah. It's the
Actually,
8th day. It's on Sunday mornings.
My favorite song from the Beatles is no, of course I'm gonna draw a blank.
Yeah.
You know, it's my favorite song, but then A Day in the Life.
Oh right,
that song is amazing.
Yeah.
You're just like, whoa, this song goes through a lot of different emotions throughout the song.
Yep.
I think John Lennon was killed in the 80s, right?
Yeah, 1980.
Yeah, my friend Lake, he's an author up in, he lives in Brookings.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really cool guy, but he is like obsessive over the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
So like he knows just about everything. But yeah, so so the Beatles were a big influence on you, and then whenever you finally got into radio, was that kind of like we were like, okay, if I get the chance to get the controls, I want to make sure some Beatles get played.
That was part of the appeal of going to the other oldie station and playing the rock and roll, because there's lots of Beatles got played there.
Yeah,
right on. Yeah,
that's awesome. So you did the second station, and then so were you going to college during this time, or what was kind of going on in your life during your early days in radio?
So when I went to high school, I was really lucky to get out. My grades and going to high school, then I get a car and a girlfriend, and start playing in a band.
Then your priorities change.
Yeah, priorities change. And the only F I ever got in school was my last semester in high school, and it was a cooking class.
Cooking.
My best friend was in it with me, and we just screwed off the whole time.
That's a good class.
I was lucky to get out, so I'm going, okay, I'm going to community college. So I did that. I ended up going to the University of California, but it took me about 6 years of community college to get there.
6 years.
So, and it was during that time I was working at the other radio station.
Nice. What gen were going to or getting a degree in?
English.
Okay, so literature. Nice.
Yeah.
So are you a big book guy? Do you like reading a lot and stuff like that? Okay, what's your favorite kind of books? Do you like the classics, or are you more of a?
No, I tend to do classics. I tend to do a lot, and that's probably because of the college. But like some of my favorite writers are old writers, and things like Raymond Chandler, the guy who wrote the Philip Marlowe mysteries and stuff like that from the 40s. It's like reading a Bogart movie, so I love those. Those are fun. J.D. Salinger, The Catcher in the Rye, that's another big one. I like those are probably my two. If I had to pick, and I'm not good at that. People, when you play Desert Island and stuff, I can't do. What's your favorite book? Well, what's your top 5 books? Because every day it's different.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I've never been a big reader, though. I've always been like fascinated by like the classics. I've always told myself I'm gonna read like all the classics. Like I'm gonna do it, and then I don't know. Maybe it's like I just pick up the book or I start reading it, and then I read it for a day, and then I'm like, I'm gonna do something else. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like, I've always loved. I don't know. I don't really know how to explain it. Like, just kind of like maybe like Walden's Pond.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like just great concept, or great concept books. Like where they really like explore different ideas.
Right. The kind of books that you actually can read them and they can change your life.
Yeah. No, I've read a lot of self-help books.
Mm-hmm.
But my favorite quote is from Fight Club, where the guy goes,
which is a good book. Have you ever read the book Fight Club?
I never read the book, but I watched the 3-hour interview with the freaking Chuck. I can't remember his last name is, but that guy is amazing. The author for that book is great. But he has that quote in that book that's like, self-help is just what is that? Yeah, self-help is just masturbation for the mind, or something like that. It's like, it's so true.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's like the only thing I think that can really help you is becoming more mindful of the moment. Cultivating mindfulness in the moment. I think that's really, at the end of the day, the only thing that's gonna help you.
You got to pour the acid on your hand.
Yeah.
Don't go to your happy place, man.
Yeah. Man, it's so true. So you lived down there for a while. Is this your first ever radio station that you've operated yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a first time thing. What brought you to this area?
My dad lived up here. My mom and dad were divorced in the 70s, and he moved up here in about 81, I want to say. Yeah. And so I spent every summer and vacation.
Yeah, because you were saying that. You were saying you were up here when you first got the inspiration. When you get back home, you're gonna.
Yeah. And from seriously from middle school, being up here and taking a walk in the redwoods, going on the Nickerson Ranch Trail, and I'm going, whoa, wow, I gotta spend as much time up here as possible. And then that became, as I grew older and got more in touch with the community, I wanted to raise kids here. This is where I wanted to have a family.
Gotcha.
And that was always like when my first wife and I were met in college and going out. The plan was to always, when we got married and got our stuff together, we hadn't had kids, we'd come up here.
Nice.
And that's what we did.
Yeah. So you did do that. Mm-hmm. Okay. So how long have you been in Crescent City for?
24 years now.
Okay, so that's a pretty good amount of time.
Yeah, I can't honestly say I was born and raised here, but I can honestly say I feel I'm a local.
But you chose to live here and you've stayed here, which I feel like there's a lot of
that's true
to that.
Anybody who stays here over the long haul, right.
Yeah, this place kind of I moved here from Phoenix.
Oh wow.
Moved to Brookings originally about 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I lived in San Diego, Phoenix, and Mexico, and those were the 3 places that I lived in my life. And
wow, where in Mexico?
Tijuana.
Oh no! Really?
Yeah. I used to live in Tijuana, just right across the border. I used to cross the border every day to get to school in San Diego, and I didn't know any Spanish or anything like that. So, but anyway, so I moved up here, and in my mind, I never really been to a lot of small towns, so in my mind the city just went on kind of forever. I know that sounds like a kind of ignorant thing to say, but once I moved up here and I felt how isolated it was, that feeling was that was a hard feeling to get used to.
Was it? Yeah.
It was. It threw me into a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic, just feeling like there's nothing around, and it's that took me probably 3 or 4 years to get over that. And then the last 2 or 3 years I've kind of been actually this place is starting to grow on me a bit. Anytime I go out of town and I come back, and I'm just thank God I'm back.
Yeah. No, I remember one time I was driving around after being up here for a while. I got a Jeep and started driving back in all the gravel roads and stuff, and going over French Hill and things, and going up to I was up Bear Basin down at the foot of Bear Butte, and got out of the park and I walked out in this meadow, and it occurred to me how isolated I was. Wow, some massive carnivore can just take me out right now and nobody know, man. You'd really see?
That's a vibe.
Is it really? You've experienced that there too? Yeah. You just look around, you go, whoa, I'm in, it's beautiful. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But there's nobody around. Yeah.
I'll kind of have anxiety, if I had a medical emergency right now.
Right.
There's not much I could do about it. Just kind of accept my fate.
Yep.
So with the radio station, kind of what is your mission with it all? What do you like to do you want to spread voices or music, or what's kind of your biggest?
It's changed over the time. Initially, when that guy, Excuse me. When Jim and I were sitting around talking about what to do with KFUG, we thought that it would be successful as a community radio station in such a small community too, because people would listen, because they would, chances are, hear someone they knew. They might even hear themselves, because it's just such a small community and a great place to do something like that. We started out with that, and it stayed that. It stayed that till probably right up until the pandemic. And then we had a lot of, because, and I was just, hey, right wing, left wing, whatever. You want to be on the radio? Come on and get on.
That's the best way. Can you pass me that real quick?
And then we had some folks basically telling people to ignore public health and to go out and to put people's lives at risk.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I can't do that. And guy who's still, he's Sam Strait. I got nothing against Sam Strait, but he had a conversation, and you see him every time you watch a Board of Supervisors meeting, right? He gets up and in his gravelly voice, and he had a show. It was Conversations with Sam, and somebody walked up to me one time and said they made a drinking game out of it, and every time he'd go, because he did that a lot, that they'd take a drink.
Oh man,
but
that's the worst when you start to notice when someone has a little quirk,
and
then it's all you can hear. You're like,
yeah. The Chuck D. I can't listen to Chuck D because all I hear is every time he breathes in between lines, every time. But so Sam was on saying some stuff that I, as the head of KFUG, I'm going, wow, that puts us in a really weird situation in which we are actually going against public health. And at the time, and everybody's, here's where we are at the beginning. This is right at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, it's very mysterious, and it was pretty scary at first when you're looking at the numbers.
And so I figure, all right, let's just all play along together, wear the mask, do what we can to get over this, and then we can sort all that out later. And it became this big deal, and it got to be bigger and worse than it should have been.
It was awful.
But I kind of went, all right, Sam, you're off. I can't have you on here basically calling for people to do things that could result in someone's death.
Right.
That's just, as somebody who heads a broadcast situation like this, I cannot be liable for that, both personally and professionally.
Yeah.
And so it kind of made this we sort of redefined KFUG at that point to be more, all right, well, if we're not going to reflect all the voices in the community, because we obviously don't agree with all the voices in the community, then who are we? Right. And we took a much more liberal turn after that.
Gotcha. Okay. For sure.
And then I'm sorry, I wanted to finish. And then since then, because of youth media work that I did with Building Healthy Communities and the Wild Rivers Foundation, youth media got wrapped up, and that leads into what we are now, which is basically focusing on youth voice and Redwood voice and youth voices here in Del Norte and in the larger region as well. And that's become the most recent focus for us.
I think that right there is like really important. Is voices in the community, young people, who giving them a chance to get their voice and their opinion out. Exactly. Because that's the future of this county, and that's the future of this area. And if we can't hear and listen to what everyone's saying, then it's just like, what are we doing?
Right.
It's like, because like people, like politicians, they could sit in their little inner circles and talk about what stop signs are going where, but it's like, at the end of the day, like, you have to, I think, like, one of the most important things in the community, like any community, is making sure that youth have a place to, like, express themselves artistically or just, like, their opinions about what's going on.
I think a lot of society and a lot of the way that we experience society is passive and wants us to just kind of shut up and take it.
Yeah.
And be an audience. And that's ironic, because social media, and like here we are not being an audience right now, right? And it's this that I want to get youth doing.
Yeah.
To get them used to speaking up and making their points of view known. And because it's easy to kind of slip into this thing where you're just kind of going to keep that to yourself, and
it's like no one wants to hear it.
Right.
No one's who's going to agree.
Right.
Who's going to, and especially in today's day and age where everything you say is nitpicked by however, like, a handful of people. But you spend a lot of time when you're younger, like, the world's telling you what you are, and then eventually at some point in your life, you go, no, I'm done with the world telling me what I am. Now I'm going to start telling the world what I am. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that the sooner that, like, young people can kind of learn that, the better off they are in the long run, because how you don't succumb to peer pressure and ending up miserable in your life because, you know, you wanted to be this person that you weren't, you know, because you didn't feel like it would be okay to be who you are.
And if you can reach that point where you can turn that off, that messaging off yourself, that's very important because that messaging is always on. And it's there all the time now.
Yeah, part of our primal hierarchy brain that's been developed over evolution, you know. It's like where it's like you have a pecking order, you know, and it's like it's in your head, and you know and you have society, like these little things, like we're social creatures, you know. We have hundreds and hundreds of subconscious cues that we pick up on that tell us where we're at in the, you know, in these little social hierarchies, and they could be different depending on what group you're around. It's incredibly like complex science when you look into it, but it's like, I don't know. That's kind of getting in the weeds a little bit. But
I know. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you totally. One thing that's weird is like just scientifically, physiologically now, they're learning like just going out in the sun changes your DNA. We are permeable, and being around each other, it changes everything. And as much as my own mythology is, I would love to think that I'm a guy on an island and there's nobody else around, and I am a rock. That's it. And I can exist without all of. It's not true.
Nope. Like we kind of comes back to Walden's Pond, you know. It's like it's like you can't. So like, I guess if it's survival, you could. If we're talking about like pure survival, but for sure you would go insane, you know. We outsource our you know, sanity or whatever.
That's a great line. Outsource our sanity. I like that a lot. That's good. That's
I think
cool.
I heard that from somewhere, but I cannot remember where. My buddy Lake told me that or something.
I'll have to watch Fight Club.
Right? Yeah. Fight Club. Just watch that twice a year.
That's it. That's your therapy.
No, that's yeah. I think that like it's so important. Like anything community, like it's like whenever I met Rory, he was telling me how he was on the radio, and in my life, I never thought like. I used to work for the newspaper.
Oh, which paper?
I worked for the Triplicate and the Pilot. I was a graphic designer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was going to college for graphic design, and I was working there. And so that was kind of like a whole situation in itself. But I loved that job. But then I met Rory, and he's like, I'm on the radio. You should come on my show sometime. And I was just kind of like so fascinated. Wow, yeah. You know, because I'd never met anyone who was on the radio or did the radio or anything like that. So... You know, we became friends, and I was on Nautical Nonsense, and
is that where this all came from?
Well, you were the bartender.
Well, I was the bartender, and he was there, and then we just became like creatively. Rory and I really are kind of like in sync. We're both really weird, you know, like both off the. We're both share a European trait that we won't mention on the air.
You're pretty out of pocket.
Yeah. We think it all boils down to us decisions our mothers made right after we were born, or a decision they didn't make. But anyway.
No. I got it. I want to know, but all right, I'll let you lead it. That's great.
So, what was your favorite radio gig you've ever had?
This one.
Segue. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I guess aside from this one, what was kind of like?
Oh, I liked working midnight to 6, playing.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't records. It was playing 4-track tapes. That's what the songs were on. But,
has the technology? Well, it's a dumb question. The technology has changed quite a bit. What can you say on all of that? Like, has it become easier, harder, or?
Wow. I don't know about easier or harder. Of course, the first radio gigs, the first 2 radio gigs out of the 3 that I've had, there wasn't a computer involved.
Right.
At all. It's hard for me to judge easier or harder because I was just a DJ. Here, if something breaks, I gotta fix it.
Yeah. So you're the man.
This is harder. This is much harder because I have to wire all this up. And anytime anybody complains about a buzz in the headphones, I take it personally.
Yeah.
Because that's me failing in some way. You know, I'll get back on it then. But I think just being a DJ, I mean, if you know your way around the technology, and that's another thing that's hard for me to judge because I've had DJs who were fantastic DJs. There was this woman, she was only on for 1 or 2 shows, and she was on K-Hum in the past. And spinning records, she was an older woman, and she could not handle the computer and couldn't continue because everything's digital now. And I'm like, it was really, really bad for her. But now if she came back, we've got the 2 turntables. We could totally do it. But
could you guys like totally do some scratching back here?
probably, well, not with those but there's 2 turntables over there by the window. That's exactly what happens on Friday nights. We have a live DJ Headcase, who comes in here.
Headcase. Dude, I need to
Headcase
get way
comes in.
more involved in all this
It's
stuff.
the House of Wax, and he's on Fridays 8 to midnight. Although usually just the first 2 hours are live. He's got a bunch of can sets in the computer he'll leave with, but he sets up 2 turntables and a microphone and scratches and does shit. He does stuff over there like that.
Man, the radio is so cool.
It is cool. It is cool. And now, because of digital and our format, which we call Whiplash Radio, it's everything. We've got like 15,000 songs in the music library, which is about 12,000 more than I'm used to having in any library. All over the place, from like the Beatles to Rammstein to Audrey Hepburn, and it's just it's a
Liza Minnelli.
I don't know if we have any Liza Minnelli. I don't know if I'll go out of my way to get any Liza Minnelli, but I do know that Barbra Streisand gets played on one show a whole bunch. But
my friend Joey, he's from New York.
Yeah.
He is the biggest fan of all of that stuff. He has. Yeah, no, Joey loves.
It's
his
a vibe.
Barbara.
It's a thing. Yeah, Barbara. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. So Whiplash Radio is kind of a term in radio, like where it kind of, when you play like all.
I don't know about in radio, but at KFUG it is.
KFUG,
That was
okay.
just the joke where it's like you'll hear something and then something else. They have the song after it.
I love that. Does KFUG stand for anything?
No.
Okay.
No, it was just an invention again of Jim Wayman. He thought it was,
Okay.
it was the closest he could get to KFUG, and that was it, right?
And what happened with where?
Jim. Okay, so Jim was not the most dependable guy.
Okay.
And if you're trying to start a community radio station with a not dependable, what happened was he was in a house over in the Birch Tract where all of this came about and started with the stream and everything. Then we started talking about getting money, and I started getting money together, like my retirement and family funds and stuff, so that we could start buying equipment and do things. He found a woman on Craigslist to move in with him. And
oh my God.
She had been to share, to whatever, and I don't know what was going on or what wasn't going on or why. She had been there for 2 days, and KFUG stream was off the air because he had paid, or she'd somehow taken money or gotten money, or he had willingly given her the money he was going to pay the cable with. And so I'm like, okay, I had some money in the bank because I was a photographer here in town. My father was the town photographer, and then I came up and partnered with him for 5 years, and then took it over. And we had gotten the school photo gig, which was a big
gig.
Big deal.
It's a big gig.
It's too much work for one guy to do.
That's a whale.
That is a whale.
That's like getting, if you're a screen printer, that's like getting the school shirts, like that's a huge,
Yeah.
guaranteed work.
And I had to buy a bunch of equipment and hire people to come in and help and do things, because you don't just go one photographer to Del Norte High School. You go 6 photographers to Del Norte High School and set up for the day.
Equipment and lighting
and move everything. And then it was green screen stuff, so it wasn't even backdrop. So then every picture, 3,000 plus
had to be
pictures,
edited with the.
and that's what I did for 6 weeks solid, for like 12 hours. You show up at a school to shoot at 6 a.m, and I go home at midnight after green screening and high grading and going through and pick. It was too much. We did it. Did we do it 2 years or 1 year? I think 2 years. And then I went, because the first year we paid for all the equipment that we had to buy. The second year was profit. And I'm going, you know what? I don't think I can do this. I certainly don't want to do this. I don't think I can do this. Jim is screwing up KFUG. I'd really like to do that. So I offered him like $2,500 to just leave KFUG alone and let me have it. And he took it because he needed the money. He didn't want to. And I kind of feel bad about it, because I remember the look on his face, because he needed money. And I'm going, I'll give you $2,500 for KFUG. I don't want it to go away. I don't want it to crash and burn.
Yeah.
And he thought, and like the most thought I'd ever seen on Jim's face. Like, and I could see him wait, because he lived radio.
Yeah.
He lived radio, but this woman, this whole situation, and this was now becoming my future too.
Yeah.
And I couldn't have Jim holding any part of my future anymore. So I offered him the money, and he took it. And that's when I took KFUG and we set up downtown. And he was on for a while, and then stuff would go and he'd go away, and he'd kind of bop in and out. And then last time, and this is some, here's heavy stuff. I feel bad about this, but not really bad because it had to happen. Jim was coming in here and showing up drunk and crashing in a back room. And we were going legit. We had things happening. People were coming in. We were having new equipment. Guests from city government coming and doing stuff. And Jim would show up and he'd crash in the back drunk. And I'd asked him several times not to do that. Please don't come and crash in KFUG. And the last time I saw Jim Wayman, I threw him out. And I had to call the cops to get him out because I had every piece of my humanity with this guy had been exhausted,
stepped over, and the lines had been crossed
several times, and that's the last time I saw him. And he ended up dying in a shelter someplace in Portland, Seattle, someplace up there. Yeah, yeah, that was the last time I saw him.
So the man, the myth, the legend.
Yeah,
Jim Wayman.
And if you knew Jim, you loved Jim, and if you knew Jim, you all were also
aware,
chronically exasperated by Jim. Yeah, yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, it's like that mix, like, of madness and
that inspiration and completely unfunctional in the world.
Sometimes, a great artist is someone who has a great work ethic, and like some people are just really, they're mad, like they could make great art, but there's no way that they'll ever be able to contain themselves or operate to build what it takes to
mix in alcoholism.
Yeah, that's just throwing fuel on the fire. You know, it's like
he could smoke pot, he could be fine, he's functional like that. He'd start drinking, he'd be kicked out of wherever he was living. It was almost like clockwork. You just knew it was going to happen. And
alcohol is not like other drugs, because the way you can get so, I feel like a lot of drugs have ceilings,
Yeah.
Like, I guess maybe meth doesn't. I don't know, but like with alcohol, you could get so smashed and that blackout, not remember anything, and really ruin your, if you can't contain it, know. So that's sad, but it's also fascinating.
Well, that's the kind of thing you're talking about with artists. I think you just summed it up right there. It's whatever it is, whatever the situation, creativity, alcohol, they can't contain it.
Yeah.
And that's part of what makes them great in the right situations and failures in the other situations too.
Yeah. It's also why a lot of like mediocre musicians make it to the top, because they're able to have that, like sometimes like bad music, these guys will kind of get up there, while like great musicians, sometimes they'll die.
That you don't even know about them.
Yeah. It's like, I think Kurt Cobain's a great example of that. I know he's like really overly talked about, but it's like he couldn't function, obviously. Look what happened to him. But his music was brilliant.
And that's the day I remember. That was a big deal. That was.
Yeah, where were you the day Kurt Cobain died?
I was working in San Francisco, and I walked into a bar called the Edinburgh Castle with and there were a bunch of people I worked with at a bookstore, and we were all hanging out there. And this guy named Owen, who was an Irish young guy, he was Irish. He was a playwright, and he worked in a bookstore because he was a playwright, and he had to make money. Walked up to me and he goes, "I remember. Did you hear Kurt Cobain died?" And he told me that. I'm like, "What?
Damn."
And I came, and I like, my brother and I were sort of like very like, I think we're probably technically same generation, although there's about 11 years between us maybe.
Okay.
But he was, at the time, like, it hit me, and I'm like, mid-20s, and he was like 14 or something like that.
Oh, so he was like,
yeah. So I went home and called Charlie, and we talked about it, because that was a big deal the day Kurt Cobain died. Yeah.
Damn. I think that's gonna start becoming a question that I ask people, because I had a musician on from the band Snickle Fritz.
Snickle Fritz?
Yeah, that's a local band.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Oh, I haven't heard of Snickle Fritz. I gotta. Just from the name, that grabs me. I gotta hear Snickle Fritz, man.
Donnie Matz Jr. He's awesome.
Okay,
he was on the show last Sunday, and I asked him, where were you when Kurt Cobain died? So it's a pretty good question. It's like, you can kind of bookmark these crazy social or events that happened. Like, I remember this awesome explanation of like what a millennial was, and it was like a millennial is somewhere, but You were born sometime between AIDS and 9/11. It's just a crazy way to explain that. But
yeah, that would put my brother right at the front end of that. Then yeah, okay, all right, wow.
So I didn't know this about you, but you said you did photography for a while. What kind of photography did you do? Every kind.
This was before digital, so in fact, I started learning with my dad, shooting medium format film, Hasselblads, Mamiyas, and then we bought like the Nikon D1X, which was a 5.5 megapixel camera. Cost $5,000.
Holy God! You're paying a grand a
megapixel. Yeah, exactly. Think if they was still the price, if that was still what's going on, think how your phones would be. So. But so we made the jump to the digital, but this was before anybody, everybody's walking around being a photographer. So we had every gig in town. We had all the sports leagues. We did all the high school dances. Wow. We did all the high school seniors. Everything except the school pictures, the yearbooky school pictures, but the seniors we did, and then babies and families and weddings and special events.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of work.
A lot of work, yeah. Wasn't a lot of money.
How would you rate our lighting in here?
Well, first off, I'm blown away by what you can get away with the little LED now.
Yeah.
Because I'd have to set up big like softbox things with like strobes in them and things.
I don't have a cloth. I'm trying to get some cloth for it. Right now I just have a filter over it.
Yeah.
To kind of block off a little bit of the harshness.
Yeah.
But a little softbox would be perfect for
that
our lights.
We've got bigger versions of these, and they've got the old what they call barn doors on them that you can pull down and kind of feather them and do things with them like that. Yeah.
3 of these will for $100 and $120 on Amazon.
Nice, right?
So
that's a big deal. That's a big deal too. That I think people don't understand is that how accessible the capabilities are now.
I think that's one of the coolest parts about living in our age is like how you can go to just making things create. Like if you want to be a creative, there is no reason that you can't do it. There's no excuses now. It's not like it's expensive. A lot of the reasons people fail is because they never try or they never do. They go, I got this great idea, but like for me, I don't know anything about podcasting. I do nothing about sound, nothing about video, nothing about any of it. But I just kind of did a little bit of research and got the most basic, we're looking at the most basic setup that you could possibly ever have, and hell, we're on episode 15 now.
That's awesome,
and we're rolling.
Because the real work and the real talent is what you're doing right there. Is just sitting there having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't do that.
Right. That I know, and sometimes I think when you're someone who is able to have conversations with people, you kind of take that for granted. You go, everyone can do this. But then you realize, no, you kind of have to be able to put your ego to the side and kind of I guess like dive deep into like more of a like intellectual capacity. Like I don't know, kind of requires a level of social awareness that I think some people just don't have or aren't interested in having.
My ability to do this was born working in retail in college.
That's huge.
And I was like, I'm a rock, man. I don't want to talk to these people. And they come up to me and I'm having to have conversations with people, and I'm going, it makes me so uncomfortable. I started thinking about it. And I thought I don't know when exactly, but it was when I'd started college and was working in bookstores, and I came up with this idea. What if I acted like I was David Letterman? What if I acted like I was a talk show host?
Yeah.
And what I found after that was that people are so much more willing to talk about themselves if you express something, even if you're faking it, if you expressed interest in what they had to say. Yeah. And then that put the onus on them. And then all you had to do was make them feel good about talking to you, and that became much easier. And that's probably
that's a very simple, good way to put it. Yeah,
and it's the only real skill I think I have. Really, everything else.
I think I'm feeling the same way about myself too. You know what we need to do? Okay, cool. Thank you. This episode is actually flowing by. I could keep this episode going for hours, but I won't. It'd be so funny if we had like a band. And we just had one person, one person that just like playing multiple instruments or something. I don't know.
You get the old school like one man band thing with the drum on the back and the horns and the stuff. That'd be
like
fun.
In our band. Wow.
My favorite part about the talk show is the guy behind the podium.
Behind the podium.
Like Andy Richter.
Oh right, yeah.
The
He's like, yeah. I'm keeping an eye on you. Man, so this episode's actually flown by. So I guess we're wrapping up here soon, but
good, because I have to put the United Methodist Church on the radio at 11. So
Okay.
we got like 6 minutes. I see.
okay. Well,
The website. Tune in to KFUG.
Oh,
yeah,
hey, there you go.
Hit him with where we can find everything.
KFUG, you can find us on well, here if you're driving around town in Crescent City proper, we're 101.1 FM. And depending on weather conditions, you can hear it farther away. But kfugradio.org is the website. There's a player on that. We're also on like TuneIn and World Radio Box and any radio aggregator that you can find online. You can get to KFUG typically.
Heck yeah. Do you want to say in your radio voice, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Salty Sundays. We'll see you next time.
Okay.
This is
Thank you for tuning in. Wait, let's see. Thanks for tuning in. What would I say? I would say it's Salty Sundays, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been listening to Salty Sundays. Well, wait, how can people hear it? How do people find it?
just on YouTube. You just find us on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, okay, all right. You've been listening to Salty Sundays on YouTube. Tune in next time for
whoever we're going to have next. Thank you, man.
Thank you,
It's
man.
been
That
a
was a lot
blast.
of fun. That was cool.
All right.
That was a good show.
That was the best show.
All right, thank you, man.